The drill sergeant looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're weak, Novik. You'll wash out in 3 days." What he didn't know was that my little sister Celeste was watching from the hospital bed, fighting for her life, and I'd made her a promise I wasn't about to break. Before we dive in, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? If you enjoy stories like this, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode is truly mind-blowing. Let's get started. I'm Paige Novik, and I was 22 years old when I walked into Fort Benning thinking I knew what tough looked like. I'd spent 4 years watching my 16-year-old sister battle leukemia, watching her lose her hair, her energy, her childhood. I thought I understood pain. I thought I understood sacrifice. But Staff Sergeant Rivera was about to teach me that everything I thought I knew about strength was wrong. The morning I met Rivera, I was standing in formation with 43 other recruits trying to keep my knees from shaking. I'd been awake since 3 a.m., not because of reveille, but because I'd been on the phone with my parents back in Montana. Celeste had spiked a fever during the night. The doctors were running more tests. My mom's voice was stretched thin when she said, "She keeps asking if you're really going to make it through this, Paige. She needs to know you're going to be okay." Rivera walked down our line like a predator sizing up prey. He stopped in front of Thompson, a kid from Texas who looked like he bench-pressed pickup trucks for fun. "Outstanding recruit." He moved to Martinez, who'd played college football. "Solid foundation." Then he got to me. 5'4", 120 pounds soaking wet, with arms that had never lifted anything heavier than my sister when she was too sick to walk to the bathroom. He studied me for what felt like an eternity. The Georgia heat was already making sweat bead on my forehead, but his stare made me feel like I was freezing. Then he leaned in close enough that I could smell the coffee on his breath and said those words that would haunt me for the next 12 weeks. "You're weak, Novik. You'll wash out in 3 days." The other recruits stayed perfectly still, but I could feel their relief that it wasn't them in Rivera's crosshairs. What Rivera couldn't see, what none of them could see, was the photo tucked inside my shirt pocket. Celeste had given it to me the day before I left. It was from 2 summers ago, before the diagnosis, when we'd hiked to the top of Bear Mountain together. She was grinning with dirt on her cheeks, and her arms stretched toward the sky like she owned the world. On the back, she'd written in her careful handwriting, "For when you forget how strong we are." Standing there with Rivera's words hitting me like a physical blow, I touched that photo through my shirt and felt something shift inside my chest. He thought I was weak because he was looking at my body. But I'd spent 4 years watching a 90-pound teenage girl fight cancer with more courage than most people show in their entire lives. I'd seen her smile through chemotherapy. I'd watched her comfort our parents when they broke down. I'd held her hand while she threw up blood and still asked me about my day. Rivera had no idea what real strength looked like, and he definitely had no idea what he was dealing with, because I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every late night Celeste couldn't sleep because of the pain. I was fighting for every dream she'd had to put on hold. I was fighting because she'd looked at me with those enormous brown eyes the day I enlisted and said, "Paige, if you can do this, it means I can beat this too." So when Rivera finished his inspection and barked, "Welcome to hell, recruits," I didn't flinch. I thought about Celeste lying in that hospital bed 3,000 miles away, probably watching the clock and wondering if her big sister was strong enough to make it through day 1. And I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going to just survive the next 12 weeks. I was going to prove that sometimes the people who look the weakest on the outside are carrying strength that nobody else can see. That first week at Fort Benning felt like drowning in slow motion. Every morning started the same way. Reveille at 4:30, stumbling out of my bunk while my body screamed from the previous day's punishment. The Georgia humidity hit like a wet blanket the second we stepped outside, and by the time we reached the PT field, my uniform was already soaked with sweat. I grew up in Whitefish, Montana, where the biggest hill was the one behind our high school, and the most athletic thing I'd ever done was carry groceries for Mrs. Patterson next door. My hands had never held anything heavier than textbooks, and here I was expected to do 50 push-ups without stopping. On day 3, I managed 12 before my arms gave out completely. Rivera stood over me as I collapsed face first into the red Georgia dirt. "Pathetic, Novik. Your battle buddies are going to pay for your weakness." That was the worst part. Every time I failed a task, Rivera made the entire platoon do extra exercises. 43 people hatting you before breakfast makes for a very long day. While the others bonded over shared misery during chow, I sat alone, picking at mystery meat and trying to ignore the whispered conversations about dead weight and why doesn't she just quit. My only lifeline was the 15-minute phone call home each evening. My parents took turns updating me on Celeste's condition, and it was never good news. Her white blood cell count was dropping. The new medication was making her sick. She'd lost another 10 pounds, but every conversation ended the same way. "She asks about you constantly," my mother would say. "She has your picture taped to her hospital bed. She tells every nurse and doctor that her big sister is going to be a soldier." The guilt was crushing. While I was failing at basic training, Celeste was fighting for her life 3,000 miles away. Our family's insurance wouldn't cover her experimental treatments unless I completed my military service. I was literally her only hope for survival, and I couldn't even do 20 push-ups. By Friday of that first week, I'd failed every single physical fitness test. Rivera called me into his office after evening chow. The space was tiny, cramped with filing cabinets and motivational posters about honor and courage that felt like they were mocking me. "Novik, I'm going to be straight with you," he said, not looking up from his paperwork. "You're holding back this entire company. These soldiers need to focus on becoming warriors, not babysitting someone who can't cut it." I thought about Celeste lying in that hospital bed, counting on me to succeed. "Sergeant, I know I'm struggling, but I'm not giving up." He finally looked at me, and his expression wasn't angry anymore. It was almost pitying, which somehow felt worse. "Wanting something and being capable of achieving it are two different things, recruit. Some people just aren't built for this life." That night, I called home and my father answered on the first ring. His voice was strained when he told me Celeste had asked him to move her bed closer to the window so she could see the stars. She'd told him she was looking for the same ones I could see in Georgia, so we'd be looking at something together even when we were apart. "Dad, I can't come home. If I quit, we lose the insurance. Tell Celeste I'm going to make it through this for her." Week 3 hit like a freight train. Rivera had moved from disappointed to openly hostile, and I was his favorite target for public humiliation. During morning PT, while the other recruits knocked out their push-ups in perfect rhythm, I'd collapse at 15 and hear his voice boom across the field. "Everybody stop. Thanks to Novik's outstanding performance, we're all doing 50 more." The groans were immediate, and so were the glares. By chow time, I was completely alone. Even the few recruits who'd shown me basic courtesy before were now treating me like I had something contagious. I'd sit at the corner table, mechanically eating while conversations died whenever I walked past. The physical fitness test that Friday was my third attempt and my last chance before formal discharge proceedings. I needed 14 push-ups, 50 sit-ups, and to complete the 2-mile run in under 18 minutes. The push-ups went better than usual. I managed 16 before my arms turned to jelly. The sit-ups were a disaster. I got to 38 and couldn't do another one. But it was the run that broke me completely. By mile 1, I was already falling behind. My lungs felt like they were filled with concrete, and my legs cramped so badly I could barely keep moving. Other recruits lapped me. Then they lapped me again. When I finally stumbled across the finish line at 22 minutes, Rivera was waiting with his clipboard and the coldest smile I'd ever seen. That evening, my mother's voice on the phone was barely above a whisper. "Paige, honey, we need to talk about something. The doctors want to try a new treatment for Celeste, but it's experimental. Insurance won't cover it unless you complete your service." My heart stopped. What happens if we can't do the treatment? The silence stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Finally, she spoke. "They're saying maybe 6 months without it, maybe 8 if we're lucky." I hung up the phone and walked straight to Rivera's office. I didn't knock. He looked up from his desk, annoyed at the interruption, but I didn't care about protocol anymore. "Sergeant, I need to talk to you." He leaned back in his chair. "Let me save you some time, Novik. I've already started your discharge paperwork. You'll be on a bus home by Wednesday." "My sister is dying." That stopped him cold. For the first time since I'd met him, Rivera actually looked at me instead of through me. "I'm sorry to hear that, but your personal problems don't change your performance scores." "I'm not asking for sympathy. I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. I'm telling you why I can't quit. If I don't make it through basic training, my sister dies. It's that simple. Rivera stood up slowly, his expression hardening again. Your personal problems don't make bullets bounce off you, Novik. Weakness gets soldiers killed. I won't graduate someone who's going to get other people hurt because she can't keep up. Then teach me how to keep up. I've seen 1,000 recruits like you. You don't have what it takes. Save yourself the embarrassment and quit now. That night, I broke every rule in the book. I snuck out of the barracks at 2200 hours and used the payphone by the PX to call the hospital directly. It took 3 transfers and 20 minutes of arguing with nurses before they finally put me through to Celeste's room. Her voice was so weak I had to press the phone hard against my ear to hear her. Paige, is that really you? Hey, little fighter, I'm sorry I called so late. I needed to hear your voice. I can't sleep anyway. The new medication makes everything taste like metal and my stomach feels like it's eating itself. She paused to catch her breath. Mom told me about the treatment, the experimental one. My throat closed up. Celeste, I want you to know that I'm going to make this work. I'm going to graduate and get that insurance coverage. Paige, stop. Her voice was stronger suddenly, more like the sister I remembered from before she got sick. I need you to listen to me. Really listen. I don't need you to graduate for the insurance. I need you to graduate because I need to know that impossible things can still happen. I didn't understand. What do you mean? Every day in this hospital, I watch people give up. I see it in their eyes when the doctors deliver bad news. They just stop fighting. But if you can do this thing that everyone says you can't do, then maybe I can beat this thing that everyone says I can't beat. We're a team, Paige. We always have been. I was crying now, not caring who might see me. I don't know if I'm strong enough. Yes, you do. You carried me up Bear Mountain when I was 7 and twisted my ankle. You carried me to bed every night when I was too sick from chemo to walk. You've been carrying me your whole life. Now I need you to carry us both across that finish line. After I hung up, I sat on the ground outside the PX for a long time, staring at the Georgia stars. Celeste was right. This wasn't just about insurance anymore. This was about proving that sometimes the impossible becomes possible when someone refuses to quit. I spent the next 3 hours studying the route map for the final ruck march. 12 miles through hill country, carrying full battle gear. I memorized every elevation change, every turn, every potential hazard. Then I went back to the barracks and quietly woke up Tomas Martinez, the only recruit who hadn't completely written me off. I need help, I whispered. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Novik, it's almost 300. We have PT in 90 minutes. I know, but I also know I can't do this alone anymore. Will you help me train? Something in my voice must have convinced him, because he nodded and grabbed his boots. For the next hour and a half, while the rest of the company slept, Tomas helped me practice carrying extra weight through the woods behind our barracks. My body screamed in protest, but I thought about Celeste fighting in that hospital room and kept moving. The ruck march started at 400 in pitch darkness. 44 recruits lined up with full battle gear and 35-pound packs, headlamps cutting through the Georgia morning mist. Rivera stood at the front, and even in the dim light I could see him favoring his left ankle. Word had spread through the barracks that he'd twisted it badly during night training, but there he was, pack loaded, ready to lead us through 12 miles of hell. Listen up, maggots, he barked. This is your final test. Anyone who falls out doesn't graduate. Anyone who helps someone else falls out with them. You maintain formation, you maintain pace, and you finish strong. For the first 8 miles, I felt like a different person. All those secret training sessions with Tomas had paid off. My pack felt manageable, my breathing was steady, and for once I wasn't the one struggling to keep up. Other recruits were starting to fade, but I maintained position in the middle of the formation. Rivera, on the other hand, was clearly suffering. His limp was getting worse with every mile, and I could see him gritting his teeth against the pain. But he kept pushing forward, too proud to admit weakness in front of his recruits. At mile 9, everything changed. Rivera stumbled over a root, went down hard, and let out a grunt of pain that carried through the entire formation. He tried to get back up, made it halfway to his feet, then collapsed again. His ankle had finally given out completely. The formation kept moving. Military protocol was clear. Maintain pace, don't break ranks, complete the mission. Other instructors were running alongside us in vehicles, but Rivera had specifically ordered them to stay back and let us prove ourselves without help. I was 30 feet past Rivera when I stopped. Every instinct told me to keep going. This was my chance to graduate, to save Celeste, to prove Rivera wrong about everything. But I turned around and saw him sitting in the dirt, trying desperately to stand on an ankle that clearly couldn't support his weight. "Keep going, Novik," he called out when he saw me walking back. "Don't throw away your chance for me." I dropped my pack next to his and started unbuckling his gear. "Sergeant, my sister taught me that we don't leave people behind, ever." "You don't understand. If you help me, you fail, both of us fail." I shouldered his pack along with mine, 70 pounds total, then pulled his arm over my shoulder. "Then I guess we better make sure we both finish." The next 2 miles were the longest of my life. Rivera was dead weight against my side, his ankle completely useless. Every step sent pain shooting through my shoulders and back. My legs felt like concrete, and my lungs burned with each breath. But I kept thinking about Celeste in that hospital bed, fighting battles I couldn't see, and I kept moving. Other recruits turned to stare as we passed them. Some looked amazed, others looked horrified that I was breaking formation. But I didn't care any more about what anyone else thought. With half a mile to go, Rivera finally spoke. His voice was rough, barely above a whisper. "I was wrong about you, Novik, dead wrong." I was too exhausted to respond, focusing every ounce of energy on putting one foot in front of the other. My shoulders were screaming, my legs were shaking, and I could taste blood in my mouth from breathing so hard. "You want to know what real strength looks like?" Rivera continued, his weight heavy against my side. "It's not about how much you can lift or how fast you can run. It's about what you choose to do when everything inside you says quit." We crested the final hill, and I could see the finish line ahead. Other recruits were already there, some collapsed on the ground, others standing at attention. Every single one of them turned to watch as we approached. The other drill instructors stood in stunned silence as their supposedly weakest recruit carried their toughest sergeant across the line. I helped Rivera to a sitting position against a tree, then collapsed beside him. My whole body was shaking from exhaustion, but I'd never felt stronger in my life. Rivera looked at me with something I'd never seen in his eyes before: respect. 3 weeks later, I graduated with the rest of my company. Rivera made a point of calling my name first during the ceremony, and when I walked across that stage, he shook my hand and said, "Outstanding, soldier." But the real celebration happened that evening when I called home. My mother answered, and I could hear the smile in her voice before she even said hello. "Paige, honey, we have the best news. Celeste's insurance approved the experimental treatment. They start next week." "That's incredible, Mom. How is she doing?" "See for yourself." There was rustling, then Celeste's voice came on the line, stronger than I'd heard it in months. "So, did you finish our race?" I laughed, wiping tears from my eyes. "We finished it, Celeste, both of us." 6 months later, I got leave to visit home. Celeste met me at the airport, and I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was growing back in soft brown curls, and she had color in her cheeks again. More importantly, she had that same determined spark in her eyes that had carried me through basic training. "I have something for you," she said, pulling out a new photo. It was from her last doctor's appointment, showing her ringing the bell that marked the end of her treatment. On the back, she'd written, "We did it together." Rivera was right about one thing. I wasn't the same person who walked into Fort Benning that first day. But he was wrong about something too. I wasn't weak then, and I'm not weak now. I just learned that real strength isn't about never falling down. It's about who you choose to help up when you're barely standing yourself. Sometimes the drill sergeant who breaks you down is actually building you up for battles you don't even know you'll have to fight.